Hello friends. I first read The Complete Golfer by Harry Vardon when I was 16. I got it out of Stirling Library in Scotland. Read it a couple of times and have subsequently quite a few more. And I'm grateful that I did, because although the techniques in here from the late 19th century bear little resemblance to the game that we play nowadays, or we teach for that matter, as a student of the game, and of course somebody who's interested in doing a good job teaching, it was ultimately valuable for me because I could see the progression of the golf swing through the last century and a half. And I just think that for any teacher of the game, that understanding of how it evolved is valuable. And there are some things in the book that are relevant to a modern golfer. Now, the grip is probably the first thing that people teach, and I always start by pointing out the hands hang to your sides with the thumbs turned in. And if you look at this picture, a lovely one from him, of holding the club with his lovely old rolled up sleeves on his jacket, you can see that the club is down by his left side, which is exactly where I like to illustrate how to start it. Obviously Adam Scott from Australia is a classic example of a probably right-handed golfer who starts most of his shots with his hand down by his left side, which I have found, my clients have found helpful. And you'll see that the thumb is turned substantially over to the right and on the club. Now that was actually very innovative, because I'm old enough to remember the starter at Stirling at Kings Park, who was, at the time I was playing, probably 80, and he obviously grew up in the same era as Harry Vardon, and he gripped the old-fashioned way with the left thumb dangling down here off the side of the club. That was how it was done forever, until Varden, and I think a few other people, brought the thumb up onto the club to the right of centre. Now, what's I think interesting is that I've looked for the rare videos of Harry Vardon hitting a golf ball, and the one I found most interesting was the one of him hitting a fairway wood, and you could see while he was waggling that the left hand was in a much more weak position. What does that mean? Somewhat ambiguous. It means turned to the left, where the thumb is more on top of the club, really referencing what would come a couple of generations after him with Ben Hogan, who advocated putting the thumb on top. He did it because he didn't want to slice, and he thought that weaker grip was valuable in that regard. And if you look at modern champions, many of them have that weak left-hand grip. Now, he then performed his swing by rolling the club to the right substantially, and it took it away low and inside, something I generally discourage my clients from doing. But obviously he made it work. He won 6 British Opens. And so he rolled the club inside, which brought it in very close. And then he lifted it up, and he had these very classical shapes at the top of the swing. The back of the left wrist was what is described as cuppy, where the knuckles are folded back toward where a wristwatch might be. The hands were under the club, and the elbow was pushed out a little bit, and the arm, the left arm, was bent, and the club quite close to the right ear. Now, that's not a shape that you can deliver successfully to the ball, but he wasn't done. And if you look at this video, you'll see that as he starts the downswing, he thrusts the hands away from him and does what we nowadays call, and somewhat disparagingly, casting, where he's throwing the club away from him and the arm so that it comes around an arc that is characteristic, again, of a swing that goes out to in, is what we're told it is. Well, out to in would mean that the club had crossed the target line and come back to the ball. He was simply going beyond the takeaway, which was much closer to the body. Now, again, referencing Ben Hogan, he advocated rolling the club on the backswing, which is fascinating. But he also thought that, and he kept his arm extended, of course, but he thought that the swing should be what is called in to out, and I'll do another video about that. So Harry Vardon was throwing the club away from him to get that club to square up. And that's what I find very interesting when I'm teaching. One of the things I look for is the grip, particularly on the first lesson when I'm seeing somebody for the first time and trying to evaluate their golf, I look at the grip and I go, oh, that's a little weak. I wonder if he rolls it or if he does anything else on the backswing. And then at the top of the swing, if I see that this is cuppy, I'm going, well, now the club face is hanging straight down, which is how Varden did it. You're going to have to work very hard to square that up. Harry Vardon did it impeccably. And I think a lot of how that evolved was because he was using wooden shafts with much more axial torque. And so he actually developed a game that gave space to first load that torque and then give room for it to unload to hit the golf ball. So I usually look at that and say, oh, well, they're going to have to hit early. I wonder if that's causing them to hit fat or hating fat, pulling up and topping the ball, and whether in fact it's responsible for going off to the right, which is very commonly the case. So even in a book that's 120 years old, I think it was first published in 1905, there are things in there that for a teacher particularly, it's fascinating and still interesting and relevant to modern day.